Hey bros, hoes, and overflows. Welcome to my channel. I am Ink. You can call me Sketch as well. Welcome to Sketchframestudios. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter, same handle. Um, so I had some people on my Instagram who were interested in me doing some layout. So I thought I would do a relaxed tutorial. We'll do this in three parts. I'll post the first part today talking about how to set up your thumbnails, how to do basic perspective but not get refined into it, and how to kind of get your inspiration flowing. This video will be in real time aside from me putting down a bunch of perspective lines. I am completely unscripted, but I am a layout artist and character designer who is relatively new to the industry, but this is my passion, so I thought I would share my process with everybody. That being said, it is my process and not necessarily the only way to do this. So, I have, I believe it is, let me check. What song am I listening to? I am listening to the Alice Wonderland Return to Madness soundtrack, which is absolutely killer. I highly suggest it if you like more horror themed music. That's kind of got me in the mood for some horror themed aesthetics. So I have some photos on Pinterest that I'll pull down in a minute when we get to that stage of some horror type photography. I don't like working from pre-existing concept art. I prefer working from photography and kind of building from there. I start with the basic, here's a tree, I like the way this tree looks, and then I mutate it and mesh it up. You'll see what I mean. Referencing is an important part of the creative process, but that being said, referencing is not copying a detail point to point. It's simply taking a look at the general shape or aspects that you like of a particular piece and adding to it. And usually that helps create the rest of your pieces. You can do things completely from imagination and start that way, but it's always good to build back towards some kind of core set of ideas. In this case, I have a Pinterest folder specifically dedicated to like photography of weird wooden buildings, abandoned buildings, trees and stuff in kind of decaying forests. Because I actually really like making forest scenes. That being said, this video will probably be quite long. The only part I am going to speed up is my perspective line drawing. I am on Photoshop, so if you use Photoshop, I highly suggest you do this part in with the pen tool. Perspective lines are just two lines on either side of a drawing that help you kind of measure out how things are looking on the horizon line. I always do a really big canvas. This is 22 by 15. And then I have a little small square that is 3 by 5 in the center. That'll be where the basis is. Once I have the idea fleshed out, I will then enlarge this drawing and make the corrections as necessary. Usually, by the end, a drawing is usually 10 by 12 or so. I'll have to double check, but it's usually around that depending on what the client wants. That being said, this is just for fun. I'll be breaking this video up into 3, 4 parts. I'll call them laxlayouts, and they will be posted once a week. They will be recorded all at once just to be transparent about things because I can't sit down and focus on doing things in parts. I have to do them all at once. That being said, each video will kind of be rather long, and if you like this first version of the series, let me know. There'll be long pauses where I'm not really talking, but I think for this first one, because it's the primary base of this, there'll be a fair bit of talking. I still haven't really looked at the YouTube copyright laws for music, so that's next on my list. Probably next video there'll be some kind of copyright-free generic music in the background. But for now, this is going to be how it is. I'm going to speed up the next 5-10 minutes of me just drawing the lines. But other than that, will be real time. And I will probably, if you want, I can leave a playlist in the description of the music that I listened to when I created this. I've got a whole folder specifically for horror music. So with that, I'm going to draw these perspective lines, and then we'll jump right back into it. Alright, as you may notice, I'm just going to hop in here to kind of explain what I'm doing. You may notice that I am attempting to make sure that all of these lines are even. The reason for that is that when you go to draw things like squares or circles, it makes life 1,000 times easier. I will show you guys some techniques either in this video or the next video of how that works. I'm going to keep going though. This is going to take a fair bit of time, so I just thought I'd hop in and let you know. It's always good to start outside of your boundary box in case you need to draw past that point, which I also suggest you do because it helps make any changes a little easier to deal with. I usually use black or red for the color because I use the filter settings like there's no tomorrow. These settings up here in the corner. You'll see when I get to the end of this section how I approach that. But that's pretty much it. I just wanted to let you guys know it's important to have things as evenly spaced as possible, especially as you get closer to the center. Some people will make the outer lines, like the lines that are further away from the actual center point of your drawing, a little bit thicker. I don't do that personally because I don't always think it matters, but it's a personal preference for a lot of people. I'm gonna mute again and keep going. Alright, I got a bit lazy there. I'm not going to finish off those lines because it gets so messy that it's just going to bother you guys. I have sped up that footage, but it's going to be the only footage I speed up. For people who have Photoshop, if you want to save yourself having to do the stuff on the top, Control C, Control V, didn't work. Oh, that's right, pen blob. Control C, Control V, edit, transform, flip flip vertical, drag it up, line it up, Control E and merge, and bam, you've got yourself your perspective lines. It's exactly identical on both sides, which makes it a ton easier. Alright, let's talk inspiration and how to go about creating it. So, music is a big thing for me, but another thing that's always important is to kind of make sure you have some idea of inspiration from other sources. Again, I prefer photography because I think it has like a more raw element to it. If it's character design, we'll have a whole separate video on that, but I usually focus with character design more on outfits and kind of tweaking them accordingly. I'm going to pull up my Pinterest here and we'll scroll through. I've just typed in dead forest trees or dead forest photos and we'll work from there. I'll just scroll through, see what appeals to me, and then I'll show you my process work from there. This is a great way to get started. If you have music in the background, it'll help you sort through the photos too, but some people don't like when you work with music. It really just depends on the person. What I'm looking for is like really thick trees, maybe some rubble, some debris, just to get an idea of how things clash together. So what I'll do is I'll save the photo, I'll copy it. You are not tracing the drawing. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm just putting it in the corner as an idea of somewhere to start. Scroll down again. And oh, if you're using Pinterest, save your sources because sometimes people you're working for will like you to show your sources even if it looks nothing like it. For me, it doesn't necessarily matter. I post a lot of these and they end up looking so different from the original that it really often doesn't even matter. Now, I don't always use references, but I do when I'm doing something like this, when it's like a foresty type setting. Let's skip back there. I don't know why I went to that. It's just more for atmosphere, you know? I'm looking for things that are unique, and the nice thing with trees and plants is they can grow almost any way. Mushrooms are also really cool for that. If you're looking to do an organic design, it's cool to grab different types of mushrooms and kind of mess around with what they look like. We're going to start with just these three because I don't want things to get too messed up for everybody. Save that. I'll leave references to these photos in the comment section down below. So what we're going to do from here is we're going to kind of get an idea of what we want to paint. I'm going to merge those three drawings down, and I'm going to take a red, and I am going to lightly start to emphasize the shapes of things. We're looking at what kind of environment we want to have done. I draw outside the line sometimes. This is a very rough sketch just to get you an idea of what kind of landscape you want. We're not even getting into the details. And don't focus too much on perspective just yet. At this stage, the perspective lines are there as a base guide, but they're not the thing that you're focusing on the most. You want to carve out those shapes. I'm thinking this is some kind of small abandoned house or something. We'll carve out those shapes a little more soon. let's see, taking inspiration from our drawings, we'll thumb out some areas where maybe some mushrooms and moss could grow on this thing. Maybe we make it inside a tree. Take inspiration from that bridge to give this some extra depth. We're not looking to copy the bridge, we're just thumbing out the existence and the structure of how a bridge works. I actually have a cool idea for how we can approach the bridge separately when we get there. So what you're going to do is just gently box this out. This is a terrible box. We will be cleaning it up. And I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Let's add some indication of some plant life over here. What can we do in the background? Have a river here. Be able to see the edge of it there. That'll give us room to create another like hill type ordeal in the background. An important thing that's always good to do is have some sort of series of objects leading back to the focal point of your drawing. In this case, I'm going to be using tree branches and the natural curve of the hill to kind of indicate that this house is the focus of our drawing. Again, these are sketches. It's not the actual final product. We're going to try to take it to a couple different steps, and then from there, we will finish off this video, and then next video we'll talk about how to go back and detail things, how to do layering and coloring maybe. Like I said, this is going to be a 3-4 part video. I don't want to make it too long. These videos will go up once a week, and if people like them, I'll keep doing stuff like this. We'll do a mini series for each different type of drawing. And different techniques you can use to create interesting shapes. Now you may notice I'm going over. That is perfectly okay. The purpose of me going over is to see if there's anything I want to add, or if when I want to finish this piece, if I want to move things over. Because sometimes your initial scene isn't what actually ends up being the most interesting part. Let's add duplication of some bushes there. Some sticks in the background that'll indicate more trees. Some kind of pathway that leads directly to the bridge. Okay, so we have our initial sketch. This is what we're thinking. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to talk about how to clean this thing up. We're looking first and foremost to get any box shapes kind of reformed. Again, I use Photoshop, so I can make sure that the boxes are properly even and working correctly. And that's okay, you can do this. It makes life a lot easier. Oh, too thick. It does make life a little bit easier when you're designing things. Just having that guideline there, and people do it in the industry all the time. They'll use like a ruler or something. It's the same thing. The only difference is I'm not doing exact measurements. I might recommend a book at the end of the video that worked really, really well for me. And actually my teacher knew the person who wrote it, which is pretty cool. So we've got the box. We're not worrying about the bottom branches yet. We're just edging out those shapes. And it's not meant to be perfectly symmetrical because this is a tree. We'll erase the lines around it that are making this messy, because we'll have to do similar things with all the other objects. A lot of people think that you don't necessarily need geometry or perspective, that when you're doing stuff like trees or plants, because they think you can just kind of estimate it. Don't estimate that stuff. I'll show you a technique in a second to do a circle, because we'll be doing these up here. But I've been doing this a while, so I can just kind of estimate where the circle should be in terms of perspective, just based on the lines. And as you can see, the more we kind of clean it up, the more it becomes its own unique shape as well. It's already divvying from the original design. Not by much yet, but it will. Perspective is very important in everything you design. Let's see. We need to add perspective lines. Do we? No, we should be good. I just eyeball that. Just making the tree root. Tree roots are interesting because you don't necessarily need them when you're drawing a tree, but they add some really nice line and life variation to your drawing. In this case, I'm not sure if I'll finish off with having this tree branch or not. I'm liking it so far, but it's also not quite what I'm looking for. Alright, where was I? Yeah, tree branches and tree roots are interesting because they kind of give a lot of character, but they can also really do a number around whatever piece you're doing because they become a focal point a lot of times without meaning to be. In this case, I'm thinking I might use it as a structure. You can use perspective for this. Let's see, is that? And I would highly suggest it. Like I said, I'll show you how to do proper perspective circles in a minute via the rocks over here on the side. Right now, I'm just thumbnailing because I'm not sure how I want these roots to kind of go yet. There we go, we have a cool looking doorway. Now is a good time to talk about tangents. So a tangent is when two lines of a drawing tend to intersect when they're two separate objects, and it makes things look unnerving. In this case, the tangent is this little bump that was here. It's slightly going over, but I think this point here is causing it to become a tangent. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to curve it out, pull it back. Now it's not a tangent anymore, and it still looks pretty cool. We'll do more talk about tangents as the drawing gets affirmed in later parts. I haven't decided if I'll do a door yet, so I'm going to leave that kind of blank yet. Now let's talk about this bridge. This bridge we don't have a design for, so it's going to be a bit of a pain. However, that being said, the easiest thing to do is to make sure that you've blocked everything out. See how off I was the first time? Now, because I have a drawing over here, you can approach things two different ways. Always use your pen tool to measure. But what I'm going to do right now is kind of use it as a base tool and not fully implement it. We're building the back box. From here, we'll start working on the other side. There we go, we have the box. So what we're going to do from here, we're going to erase these back lines, being very careful because we do have part of our kind of rough sketch back there. There we go. We're going to take a look at the photo we had for reference. We're going to decide if we really like that. I don't personally like the design, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to thumb it. We're going to hit extras, and this should bring up your grid. If it doesn't, I'll show you in a second how to do the grid. We're going to straighten these lines out, and every 2 boxes, we're going to add another line. From here, what we're going to do is connect it to the line over here. We're just going to focus on the top because that's where it's going to be important for this one. Just roughing it out. Cooleronis. We've got that done. It's not perfect, but it'll work. Turn off your extras. Now we're going to do some funky stuff. Whenever I'm not sure about a bridge design, I always start by kinda making some weird shapes between these lines. See what kinda works, what kinda doesn't work. I'm kinda liking what I've got so far. It doesn't have to be symmetrical, that's the thing too. So I've got the base. I don't know why I have the gradient scale on, I need to fix that. There. We're going to start fleshing out tiny details now. And you'll see why in a moment. We're not going to go full detail, just basics. This is for structure. So we got our base down. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and I'll do a little quick cut just so I can go let my dog out back, and we'll come back. I'll let you guys kind of look at what we've got done so far for a second or two, and I'll cut the rest of this little gap, and then come right back to it. And we're back. I'm going to show you guys how you can transfer stuff from one side to the other. Now that we've done these lines, it gets to be real easy. So all you want to do, lower your opacity for your eraser, gently erase things, change this so that it's set to divide. That's your graph. You're going to make a new layer. What you're going to do, we'll start at the bottom. Start around the center of this. Now, it really depends on the design that you're doing. Just gonna switch that out. Do the fancy schmancy thing, stroke. Make sure it's nice and small. I've got this at 20, so I'm going to bring it down to 7. Looking pretty spicy. I'm going to do that for each little nook and cranny of this thing. Now you may be wondering, it doesn't look like this is going to connect up. You would be wrong, because remember, it is pushing downward. It doesn't have to go all the way to the top. So what you're going to do, pull it down like that. There's part 1. Oh, whoops. You're going to grab each one of these little circle things, pull it on over. Now, I'm not worried about these circles looking perfect. We're just doing measurements right now. We'll get to fixing the actual circles, or in this case, they're spheres, a little bit later into the process work. Right now, the goal is to make sure that this thing has the appropriate number of divides. Now, you can use multiple colors if you want. I can kind of tell where things are, so it shouldn't matter too much. So we go 1, 2, 1. These are on the outside. 1, 2. Gonna do the same down here. 1, 2. Try the little divide line between them. Approximate this line here because you have a base. Looking pretty good. Switch your colors from that shade to another shade so you can do the next section. I'm going to do orange. So you want to grab this line, pull it right on over again. Make sure that it's lined up correctly. Looks like it is. Stroke. Ah, that blends in too much. Hold on. Stroke. We want to approximate like that. Actually, we might have to do that differently because I'm noticing an error. So I've got this one here. Should be able to approximate its size to be about there. Based on where the center line is, yeah. These are approximations, so I guess that's more or less correct. Bloop. Yep, we actually nailed it. It's just that my shape was off. Go. Lightly erase the sections that don't matter, so some of these lines can be removed now. However, you want to keep the line you just made, because this line will be important later. Gently add the perspective line for the other side. We'll worry about these front banisters last. Now you want to approximate the difference from here to here. We know that that's kind of a blank space, so just draw a line from top to bottom there. We know line 1 is here. Which means line 2 is probably about there. It's more for measurement purposes, so don't worry if it overlaps. Again, we're still in the rough draft phase. This is just step 1. I go usually a little bit faster, but because I'm talking, this kind of makes it a bit more of a challenge. Just gonna... And it's okay if the perspective looks a little uneven. Something I was taught while I was still training is that sometimes perspective looks weird on one angle, but it isn't actually. So trust your gut. Boop, boop. Approximate, boop, boop. There's the banisters. You can see it's starting to come together now. I'm going to do what we did earlier for this section here. Now here's where things are going to start looking weird, because as you can tell, we are now at a point where these lines would intersect each other. And that's okay, that's what it's supposed to do. Go like that. noisy. Alright, so with this, what we're really aiming for is to get these lines to look curved inward. We're not going to worry too much about it hitting the inner mark. It'll look a little bit like it's this. Oh, sorry. I'll have to cut out that sneeze. It'll look a little bit like it's there, but it won't be the be and end all if it is. Or if it isn't, rather. We're going to approximate. You would think it would be over more, but it really isn't. It's maybe about there. Which means I have to pull this banister over just a little. Mistakes are okay. They happen all the time. Don't be afraid to change your drawings to make them look right. That doesn't mean you have to go crazy with it, but if you see something that is inherently incorrect in your opinion, then you can fix it. It's pretty easy. That's part of the fun of it, too. Loop. We're going to talk about tangents in a bit and why it's important to look out for them, but there's definitely some tangents that you can see in here. But because it's the early stages of the drawing and we're just planning things, that's okay. Now these are still flat drawings. We haven't gotten to building up the next stage of this. This bridge is going to be the trickiest thing for us to draw. At least, in my opinion, it'll be one of the trickier things. Alright, as you can see, we've got the base here. We're going to hide some of this other fluff so we can get down to really grinding out the, I want to say meat and potatoes. Is that the thing people still say? So we've got the base. We're going to highlight that there. Now what we want to do is talk about structure. What is this thing supported by? In this case, you can see there are two small pillars here. Now, to make this look correct, what I'm going to do is create a small X, and this is why you really need things to look as square as possible in the grid. Now I'm roughing this out. I don't think it's going to look quite correct. You can use the other tool, but I'm just roughing it. That being said, it's not going to look like a perfect circle, I don't think. Let's zoom in a bit. I can maybe make it look perfect if I just get a little closer and actually do the work correctly. Let's see, why don't we go from here, here to here, stroke subpath, Alright, let's see. There we go. Now we can create the proper circles. So when I said earlier you need to make circles that work, and the reason you have these squares everywhere, I'm going to lighten that up. These lines are still too thick, to be honest. Bloop. Is because the easiest way to make an accurate circle is to create cross-hatching. Now, for sake of making things easier, I'm going to show you how to hand do this circle in case you don't have Photoshop or you don't have a pen tool. I need a different color. We're going to use green here. I always start by roughly, because the idea of these things is you're supposed to follow them point to point. So you go point, cut around, and bam, you have a circle in perspective. Now this looks a little bit more like an oval, but don't let that fool you. It is in fact a circle. It's just flat. you're going to do now is go to each one of these edges that you've created. You're going to pull it up. Now these are rough. Again, we're still in the rough stage. I'm not going to focus too much on this. It's just so we can get proper structure. And what you're going to do is draw them point to point again. There's a couple different ways to do this. Some people work from the top and then they pull down. In some regards that's easier, but I'm just roughing things. We might do that later on when we're trying to get everything absolutely accurate. But generally speaking, as long as it kind of matches up, you can kind of get away with it. Draw a smaller circle on top, and that'll be where our base is here. I'll show you more techniques in the next section of this video to talk about how to make all of this kind of work properly. We're just roughing things out. And you'd think because the majority of this is like organic shaped that you wouldn't need guidelines, but you'd be wrong. It's important to always have a guideline. There are guidelines to do like full circles and stuff too, which I'll show you later, but we're still just roughing things in. Show you in part 2 how to do spheres in perspective and make them look really nice. I'm a big fan of either having really sharp design or having really a lot of circles, so it comes out in a lot of my work. And you'll see when we get to coloring stage why I decided to go this route. It's not just for like eccentricity, I guess you could say. It actually serves a purpose in the design, and that's very important. Everything should serve either an aesthetic purpose or a plot purpose in your pieces when you're drawing them. I'll zoom out in a second and show you what it kind of looks like. Again, this is a very slow and boring video, I apologize. I'm sure there's more exciting content out there, but this is for educational purposes and just to kind of hang out with me, so I appreciate you being here. I'm a bit nervous, as you can tell. I sound a little monotone because I'm trying not to sound like I'm absolutely, like, insanely nervous, but I've never done... Well, I did a YouTube video a bit ago that talked about how I was testing colors on YouTube, and I also deleted a video that was basically this, but it just wasn't looking very good, so I thought I'd change it. I had some errors and the whole bit. So, this is my attempt to properly do a first video, and I doubt it'll be any good, but that's okay. I'm more here for fun and to help people learn. That is too thick. We'll talk next episode, maybe, or maybe the third video, about knowing when things aren't quite proportioned correctly, because you can have crazy extreme shapes, that's perfectly okay. But if it doesn't look like it would work, then it probably needs to be adjusted. And we'll talk about how to tell those things. It's more of an architecture thing. I have no degree in architecture, obviously, so I just try to eyeball it. I've read a couple books, but like reading a book is not the equivalent of being trained in something. Not when it's so technical as that. Power to the people who do agriculture and architecture. Like, they have crazy mad skills and they're massively underappreciated. They're just as much of an artist as you or I might be. Same with the people who design furniture. I don't think they get enough respect either, because a lot of them, they spend their lives learning how to do the technical side of things, and it often gets depreciated or undervalued because it's not quote unquote pretty. But like, take a look at some of the car designs that are out there and just appreciate that someone spent months building that design for some company. It's not just pre-designed. Somebody had to create the concept work, build a 3D model, talk to engineers about how the parts all line up, all that really fun stuff that we just don't really appreciate in our everyday lives. Everything, in a sense, is a form of art, and it needs to be appreciated a little more, in my opinion. But particularly, I think architecture and agriculture needs more appreciation. We are now following those guidelines that we set up earlier to make sure that the drawing looks and feels like it's all one piece. We haven't even gotten to talking about how we'll handle the actual inner flooring. This is just the structure. The inner flooring is going to be cool. I've got some ideas of like maybe the outside is metal and the inside might be like wood or something. Remember, it's okay to make corrections in your artwork. Yeah, that matches up much better. We're very close to calling it a day for this piece. I will do some box flooring, or identification of the flooring at least, and then we'll come back and finish the details off tomorrow. I think this video is almost like 45 minutes, but I'm not sure at the moment. I need to have a little timer up, and I never do. That being said, here's what it looks like when we take away the boundaries. You can see it's starting to come together really nicely. We've got some good details starting to form. Next episode, we'll finish off the bridge. We'll move to the next sections. It'll just be, maybe I'll speed up the process of me doing some of the other artwork in the next video, and we'll just do like an overvoice. I'm not sure yet. Let me know if you prefer this long format. We'll do some experimentation next time around. But I think this is a good place to start to end this. So we've got the tree, which is formed back here. We've got the start of the bridge. And if we pull up the rough stuff that's in the background, you can see how it's starting to all kind of come together a little bit. I need to dupe. It's all starting to come together a little bit more. So next episode, we'll start getting things a little bit more cleaned up. Just going to erase that for a minute. So that's kind of what it's looking like so far. We'll come back next week and we'll talk about cleaning it up a bit more. We'll get into how to figure out your color schemes, and we'll work from there. Thank you, and this has been Ink or Sketch, whatever you prefer. And this has been Lax Layouts Part 1.